It is often said success in musky fishing is measured in fractions of an inch. When you pay attention to the details, things go good and you land fish just like this one, but they don't always go according to plan. Miss the details and this happens. The line between success and failure is small. Get it right and you'll slide the bag under more fish this season. Hey everybody, welcome back to 54 Bust, and right off the top I'm just going to say I've been under the weather for a week, so if I sound a little bit dodgy or my voice breaks, I do apologize, but was feeling better today, so I thought we could get this video done for you guys. So that out of the way, today we're going to talk about some details in musky fishing that will help you guys win on the water, and sometimes we lose, and we're going to start right now. When we started musky fishing, we're like everybody just starting out. It's about catching the fish, whatever the cost, whatever happens, however you got to get that fish in the bag. And in a lot of cases, it's just blind ass luck that happens. But as you get better and you start to pay attention to the details, little things can really transform your time on the water. And one of my really good buddies, Kevin Wagner, you might remember he had chimed in on the Do You Bump Fish or Not video. Really good buddy of mine, and he's very detail orientated, and that's kind of rubbed off on me. I think I'm fairly detail orientated in how we approach musky fishing. So I thought it would be fun to look back at some of our catches from last year and look at some of the details that really helped us. And then I'm just going to be brutally honest on one of my figure 8 fish where I just made the most rookie of mistakes. And I know a lot of us out there do this similar thing, but I'm just going to throw myself right under the bus with that one. Let's start getting into our examples here. So the first thing I want to talk about is check the drag on your reels. We're notoriously bad for this in the fall when we troll and then we switch over to sucker rigs. So trolling, you back your drag down, we'll troll for an hour or two, and then maybe we're going to transition over to sucker rigging and we don't tighten down the drag. And this happens more often than not with us, and it is a problem that we know and we try to make a mental note now. But I've seen other examples where guys store their reels or their rods at their house or in their garage, back the drag off, they get on the water. So I actually have an example here where we transition over from trolling into sucker rigging. I managed to get the fish in the bag, but you'll hear on the clip here, I actually say to Dave as I go to set the hook, I'm like, oh, my drag's still set for trolling.
Keep him up there.
It happens way more often than you would think. So just check your drag when you get on the water, especially if you're coming up to Canada for your first trip of the year, your first time ever, and you might have had all your drag set loose for traveling. When you get up here, get down on the dock before you even get out in the boat. Do a couple practice casts, make sure everything's good, and set your drag. I just can't tell you enough how many times I've seen people lose a fish or have issues because the drag wasn't set tight. As we move on to detail number 2, this is something that you hear so often in videos or when you're out with guys fishing. Fish comes up, it nips at the bait, and you just hear, oh, it's not hooked very well. Get the net, it's not hooked very well. 9 times out of 10, it's actually hooked better than you think. But there are times when you do have a fish that just nips at the bait, maybe gets one barb, maybe it's hooked on the outside of the lip, maybe it's hooked right at the beak. So you need to be able to read those times and figure out what you're going to do with that fish in the moment. And this detail that I'm going to talk about is kind of 2 things. One is it's being able to read how that fish is hooked if you have a chance to beside the boat. And the second detail is being able to thumb the reel. And for those of you that don't know, that's when you set the hook and the reel's engaged, but as the fish comes in and you see it's not hooked very well or it wants to make a run and your drag's too tight, that's when you click your reel in and you free spool it and you control it with your thumb. I'm not a big proponent of that because I think today's newer equipment can handle having the drag set tight and the fish pulling on it. It will pull drag. The rods are pretty well able to handle all that, but there are instances, and this example here, I actually read that the fish isn't hooked very well, and on the first turn, I actually free spool it back towards Dave. Dave couldn't quite get the net, and then it comes back in, and I'm able to get it in the net by doing a little bit of free spooling. And in this example, the fish actually hits out away from the boat, and we'll run the clip, and I'm going to stop it at one point, and you can actually see that the fish has it like this. The lure is completely out of its mouth, and when we got that fish in the boat, it actually had one barb up in the outside corner of its mouth. So that you really need to pay attention to how the fish are hooked, and if you feel the need to try and thumb it, then by all means do it, but that's just not something that most beginners should be doing. It's something that maybe you would practice on some smaller fish if you felt the need to. So let's check out that example.
Oh, here was one.
The fish is coming in, it hits right there, and I'm going to stop it right here. Here you can see the lure is completely out of the fish's mouth. I had a pretty good look at it. It rolls.
Yes, come back here. Come back here. He's not hooked real well.
You can tell it's not hooked very good. I had free spooled it at that point.
Bring him here.
Here I think it's engaged again. It comes around, and I think right there I might have free spooled it just briefly, and then we get it in the bag. So again, it's one of those examples where you need to read things on the water as they're happening, and having the ability to tell how well a fish is hooked, that can really pay off when you get into some bigger fish and you need to understand how well they're hooked and how much you can horse that fish into the net. We all make mistakes in figure eights. This isn't so much about the figure eight, and I did do a video on common figure eight mistakes, and I'll put a link down below because I think that's an important video as well. But in this case, this fish comes up, it hits the bait. I think it's actually hooked pretty good, and I do one of the most common mistakes that I see a lot of beginners, and I'm ashamed to say I did the same thing. I tried to get too cute with the fish, and what happens is the fish hits in the outside of my turn. I start walking it towards the front of the boat, and I'm not sure why I decided that I thought I could walk this fish around the trolling motor. So I'm in my 8, I roll around to my outside, the fish comes in, and the fish hits right there. If we stop it here, the fish is moving to my left at this point. The lure is T-boned with the leader out the left side of the fish's mouth. So the leader is obviously towards the end of my rod, and the hooks are facing towards me. So let's run this ahead a little bit. Now I pull the fish around, and now it starts walking to the front, and if I stop right here again, here's where I make my tragic mistake. So the fish is moving to my right, the leader and the lure is still out of the left side of the fish's mouth, and in this instant, I'm already starting to walk forward because the fish is swimming away from me, and knowing that the lure was out of the left side of the fish's mouth, I should have pulled my rod around to my left, and I would have actually drove those hooks into the fish's face more. But instead, I try to make the mistake of walking it around the front, and I don't know why I did that. So as I tried to walk it around the front, the fish is holding the lure like this. So it's going to my right, and what I should have did is pulled that lure around that way, and it would have actually drove those hooks into the mouth more. But what happened, I'm just going to switch my hands here so it's easier. As that fish is swimming to my right, I try to pull that fish around to my right. It opens its mouth, and then I pull the lure that way. And a lot of times you hear guys on the water, oh, it spit the hook, it did this, it did that. In this case, I pulled the lure straight out of the fish's mouth. It was probably hooked okay. I just went the wrong way with it. In real time, it's a really tough call. And I know myself that in the past, I used to do that walk around the boat stuff, and it just rarely ever works. In most cases, you're better off to hold your position and try and fight that fish where you are, because twofold, you're going to have to walk around the boat over top of all kinds of stuff. And now you're putting your net person in a tough position. They don't know where you're going to be. So I would just say, don't do that mistake. Try to stay in your area and try and read which way that lure is in the fish's mouth, and always put pressure so that the hooks are going in. Don't make the same mistake as me. I added a quick clip here from my buddy Matt Babrock, and he actually hooks one in the front of the boat in the figure 8. He gets pretty excited and he walks all the way around the back of his boat. His buddy nets it towards the front on the other side, and it works out.
Okay.
And it can work out when you do that, but there's so much room for error when you do that. So you really need to, again, read how the fish is hooked, just like the previous example. But it's all about time on the water and reading each situation as it unfolds. And I know in real time it is very hard to do. Okay, in our next couple examples, these are fish that are caught back to back. And I know I've used this footage a few times over the years, but it's really crucial to pick up on the one small detail that we've seen in these clips, but I don't know that I've ever really fully mentioned. And in the first clip, I got a fish on dive and rise. In fact, it was on, no surprise, my lucky suic. And it hit right at the back of the boat. We got it in the net. And in the clip that we're going to show as I get it out of the bag, and I'm talking about the lure, in one scene, you can actually see the front hook has a big bend to it. I don't really talk about it in the first clip. I throw the lure beside me. We get the fish out. We move to our next spot, catch another fish. And as I'm talking about how I caught it, I said, we changed out the front hook after I caught the first fish. And it was because Dave was like, hey, you got a bend in that hook. And I was like, is it okay or not okay? And Dave's like, you better just change it out. And as luck would have it, the second fish hit the front of the suic and was caught on that front hook. So you need to be very diligent on checking hooks after every fish. That first fish bent the hook, and I may have lost the second one had I not changed out the hook. Hooks are cheap. It's cheap insurance. And let's check out those two clips here. So this is my trusty old suic. This is the Warhorse. This is the one that we call the One, silver jailbird. Okay, we got a nice fish in the bag here. We'll reach down and grab them.
He's not ready to give up the fight yet.
All right, here we go. Oh, that's a decent one.
Well, he's just taking a shit on it.
All right, there we go. We definitely got a decent one to go on the... Okay, guys, we're back. We just literally put that last fish back in the water, and we moved over to another spot. And I had to change one of the hooks out on my suic. Dave's like, you better just change it just in case. So I swapped it out. Dave was just sharpening his hook, and I first cast, literally just cast out from the boat, hit my lucky suic again.
On the new hook.
On the new hook, it hit right at the front of the bait. So we got another decent one in the bag here. All right. Not as big as the last one, but still a pretty decent fish. Last little detail I want to talk about, and I don't know that it's so much a detail as it is a tactical decision in the boat, but it's one that's very hard for a lot of guys to do, especially newer, inexperienced anglers. And in a lot of cases, the guy at the front of the boat's going to be fishing your fastest moving lure, or the one that he's going to be able to cover whatever the structure is you're fishing better. And it's very hard to fish from the back of the boat and not want to just mimic the success of the lure at the front. And for us, we understand that. So if it's Dave and I, or if it's Dave, Kyla, and I, we will work the water column and we'll try and always run different lures. And for us, we try to take that, whoever catches the fish out of it, we're happy if the boat gets a fish. So in this next example, I'm fishing with my buddies Matt and Ron Abel. and we're fishing Eagle Lake. And I believe Ron was using a bucktail, Matt was using a swimming dog, and he was moving a lot of fish in some shallow weeds. And I was sticking with, I had a bar fighter, I had a Suic, and then I threw on a scallywag from Lumok Lures. I'd never used this lure before. It's a dive and rise / glide style bait. It's very unique. I did a cool video on this underwater. I'll put the link in the description below. But I was running this at the back of the boat while I was operating the boat because I know the lake. Those guys had never been there. Matt's moving a lot of the fish at the front, and he was using swimming dog. So definitely two different styles of baits. But I was just sticking with a dive and rise style from the back, just kind of doing that cleanup over the deeper areas. And I'm okay with that situation where Matt maybe will catch all the fish at the front. Well, this day I ended up getting a really good fish on this bait at the back of the boat, casting away from shoreline, away from structure, picking up a fish that, in my estimation, was hanging off the first break line of the structure. I didn't see him on the graph, didn't see him on the live scope. He just come up, hit on the surface, busted a brand new rod that I just had, which thankfully Thorn Brothers fixed for me. But the power of having a different style of lure at the back of the boat can't be overstated. And in a lot of cases, when you have confidence in a lure at the back of the boat, you can outfish people at the front that maybe on paper are using a better style of lure. You look at guys like Doug Wagner on YouTube. He catches so many fish from the back of the boat because he has confidence in what he's using. And it's not to say the people at the front aren't catching, but he just understands the situations he's in. The details in musky fishing can mean the difference between a successful day on the water and an absolutely dreadful day on the water. These fish are so hard to catch. Put the odds in your favor and just try to pay attention to all the smallest details, and you guys will have more success on the water. And you want to check out how we paid attention to some details? Check out the video right here where you're going to see where we made the decision after moving a fish on a Medusa to switch spots and put on a shallow swimming dog, and we put a super nice fish in the net. And until next time, 54 Bust is out of here, and we'll catch you guys out on the water later.